I'm Mike McGinty, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you about one of the missions that I flew in 1967 over North Vietnam. But first, let me talk a little bit about myself. I went to pilot training, UPT as it's called then. I went to pilot training in 1965, and I graduated in 1966. I finished number 8 in a class of about 34, but many of us were fighter qualified, but only the number 1 guy got an F-100 or a 105. Everybody else that was fighter qualified had 2 choices. 1, you could take the back seat of an F-4, or 2, you could return as an Air Training Command instructor pilot. So I decided to take the F-4 option. And after that, I then went to survival school. I trained at Davis-Monthan in Tucson for about 8 months in the F-4 total. That's where I got my assignment to UBAN with jungle survival en route at Clark Air Base. And I arrived at UBAN in January 1967. I was assigned to the 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, commanded by Colonel, now Brigadier General Robin Olds, who was, in my opinion, the very best combat leader that I ever met. Further, I was assigned to the 497th Tactical Fighter Squadron, known as the Night Owls, mainly because we flew most of our missions at night. In Tucson, I trained with Rick Hilton. I lived with Rick at UBAN, and I flew most of my 115 missions with him. He is still, to this day, the best fighter pilot that I have ever met, and I learned so much from him about how to fly fighters and how not to fly fighters. When I got to UBAN, there was great excitement in the air because of the success of the Bolo 1 mission flown on January 6th. That mission was planned and led by Robin Olds. It involved 32 F-4s, 8 flights of 4, and they were going to simulate the F-105 routes, call signs, and even use the new electronic countermeasure pods that they were provided to the F-105s. On that particular mission, Bolo 1, they were so successful they shot down 7 MiGs on that one mission. So it was decided to fly Bolo 2, a mirror image of Bolo 1, and that would be done on the 23rd of January. This time it would be led by our Vice Wing Commander, Colonel Vermont Garrison. He was also a World War II ace like Robin Olds. Our squadron was assigned to fly the last 2 4-ships of the 32-ship formation. Rick and I would fly in the number 2 position off the left wing of the 7th Flight of 4 leader. We would have a full air-to-air munitions load, 4 radar-guided Sparrow missiles and 4 heat-seeking missiles. Like Bolo 1, we would have the new ECM jamming pods. They were also borrowed from the 105 wings. The 105 wings were the only wings that had the new pods. And they were most effective if you flew almost a 1,500-foot line abreast formation, not staggered in any distance between you. Line abreast was best for ECM coverage. The briefings for this Bolo 2 mission and the pre-flights, the arming, and the takeoffs were normal. But if you can imagine 32 F-4s taking off at about the same time, it is quite a sight to see. Once airborne, all of our missiles, radars, and ECM pods were again checked, and everything turned out okay. We headed north to the refueling tracks over Laos, where each plane cycled through the tanker twice, so we could depart the tanker with a full load of fuel. Our assigned route was to climb to 26,000 feet, head north to Hanoi, right turn towards Haiphong, then a right turn back to the southwest to head back to the refueling tracks over Laos. There was one major mistake made by the overall mission commander, Colonel Vermont Garrison. He crossed into North Vietnam there at 26,000 feet, and he was above a 22,000 foot undercast. So there was only 4,000 feet between the top of the undercast and the flight that he was flying at 26,000 feet. As he crossed into North Vietnam, he decided the weather is too bad to continue the mission. So he put out the cancel code. Everything was done with code words. So he put out the cancel code word over the strike frequency, not the guard channel or the emergency frequency as he should have. Those of us in the last 2 flights were still refueling on the tankers using a different frequency. So we did not get the word that the mission had been canceled. We continued then with our assigned route. We left the tankers, climbed to 26,000 feet above that 22,000 foot undercast, and crossed into North Vietnam and headed to Hanoi. We armed our missiles and moved into the 1,500 foot line abreast formation for the best possible ECM coverage. We heard or saw no activity on our radars. As we started our right-hand turn from Hanoi, all hell broke loose. We were about 26 miles from Hanoi at the time. Our plane, flying on the left side of the formation, was hit by a SAM missile. It rolled 135 degrees to the left. We later learned that the SAM crew could not see the individual planes in the formation, so their strategy was to launch the SAM missile on the side of the jamming strobe and hope that as it followed the jamming strobe on the edge, it would pass by an airplane close enough to cause a proximity fuse. And guess what? It did. The warning equipment on our planes was also blocked out by the ECM pods. Only the red launch light might work. And we think, in hindsight, we saw the red light flash a couple times just before we were hit. Our situation, just 4,000 feet above the undercast, the missile was going Mach 2 when it detonated. That gave us no time to do any kind of evasive maneuver. Other members in our flight reported seeing 2 more missiles fly over our head, just missing the formation. So now what? The emergency procedure every pilot learns in training is 1, maintain aircraft control, 2, analyze the situation, and 3, take the proper action. That's great advice, and we followed it working together to save the F-4 and ourselves. When we rolled back to level flight, we started to figure out what was wrong. First, there was a huge fire burning at the tail of the airplane. That was probably caused by the volleyball-sized holes in the back of the airplane in the number 5 and number 6 fuel cells. I could see that through my 3 mirrors, that we had this huge fire. We had lost the left engine, and we lost that half of our flight controls. We had hundreds of smaller holes on the left side of the airplane caused by the exploding missile, and these holes were leaking hydraulic fluid or airplane fuel. We were slowly starting to lose our utility hydraulic pressure, which powers everything but the flight controls, things such as your landing gear, your nose wheel steering, the air refueling door, the air refueling receptacle, etc., etc. So now back in level flight, we started to figure out a plan. First, the large fire at the back of the airplane had gone out. Whew, that's good news. Probably because all the fuel from these big holes had burned up, or because there was not enough oxygen at 26,000 feet to sustain the fire. I'm not sure which. Next, we started to figure out how far we could get on the fuel we had left. The answer was not very far, maybe just enough to get us closer to the Laotian border, where rescue chances might be better if we had to eject. We then decided we need to reduce our drag so we could go further on the fuel that we had by jettisoning our 2 370-gallon external fuel tanks that hung under the wings. This could be a problem because when you jettison those tanks, it fires in a jettison cartridge, which could start a second fire because of all the hydraulic fluid and gasoline that was leaking out of the plane. But we were lucky because the 2 tanks separated without a problem. We then started through the emergency procedures from the checklist to make sure that we had looked at everything. While we were working through the checklists, our flight leader called the GCI site, Ground Controlled Intercept Radar Site, letting them know about our problem. The GCI site would alert our base at Ubon that we had a problem. They also alerted the rescue helicopters the Jolly Greens, and the A-1 Sandy escort planes that they may be needed if we had to eject over Laos. Then we got a really strange radio call. It was from one of the tanker pilots who said, "Forward flight, we're coming to get you." Say that again. "Forward flight, we're coming to get you." That's great news. But at the time, SAC would not allow any of their tankers to cross into North Vietnam. And we were well inside of North Vietnam at the time. The next challenge was the tanker rejoin. That had to work out perfectly or we were going to be in deep trouble. To do this, you have the tanker come head on to you and about 25 or 30 miles in front of you. Tell them to start at a 180-degree turn, and you would close in and pull up behind the tanker. This was a critical rejoin because if we rolled out too far behind the tanker with only one engine, there was no way we were going to catch the tanker. So fortunately, we were very lucky and it worked out. We pulled right up into the contact position behind the tanker. But now, with no utility hydraulic pressure, our refueling door, which is located just behind the back cockpit on the top of the fuselage, our refueling door would not open. So the boom operator used the boom to tap the door to get it fully open. And then the boom would not lock into the refueling receptacle, but he passed gas through the opening until it started coming out of the holes at the back of the plane. It was absolutely amazing work by the boom operator. We flew behind the tanker all the way back from North Vietnam, over Laos, and into Thailand to U-Ban. There we made a visual approach to the U-Ban runway and blew the landing gear down using the emergency air bottles. At 50 feet above the runway, our remaining flight control hydraulic system failed, so we had no controls left. But we were able, since we were so low, to continue to touchdown. We pulled the emergency brake air bottles and coasted into the barrier with our tail hooked down. We shut down the good engine and got out. However, the real heroes of this mission that got us home from North Vietnam to U-Ban was the tanker crew that violated all the strict SAC rules and flew into North Vietnam to save us. They are the unsung heroes of this mission. Again, they are the unsung heroes of this mission. We have never been able to find out who they were, to get their names, or possibly thank them or submit them for some sort of award, like a Distinguished Flying Cross. The plane had over 500 holes in it, and I don't think it ever flew again. In closing, look at this picture. See, there's a circle on the side of the airplane just below my canopy sill. That was caused by a piece of the exploding SAM missile that hit the side of the airplane next to my cockpit. It came through the side of the airplane, hit the circuit breaker panel there, and fell down on the radio control panel. But if it did not hit that circuit breaker panel, it would have gone straight into my chest, and that would have been a big problem for me. It was given to me later by the crew chief as he cleaned up the airplane. But it was truly, truly my lucky day. It was not such a lucky day for the other 4 ships from my squadron. One of their F-4s was also hit by a SAM, and that crew had to eject immediately. They were captured and spent 7 years as POWs in Hanoi. I'm happy to say they both survived and are doing okay today. I told the other pilots and the ground crew that met us after landing, well, 1 down and 99 more missions to go over North Vietnam before I complete my 100 missions and can go home. Yes, this was my very first mission. This was my very first mission. Thank you.